look at your shoulder and try to figure out what's going on. And the first thing I want to do is identify some structures of your shoulder and see if I can reproduce your pain or see if there's any change in temperature or texture of those structures. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, as we talked about earlier, a minute ago, your shoulder, I know that you're having pain out here, but we actually need to look at your whole shoulder complex. So I'm going to start actually right in the middle here in your suprasternal notch. Okay? Are you guys able to see? So this is going to be the manubrium, which is the top of the sternum, and this is the suprasternal notch. Okay? If I palpate, here is the start of his clavicle. Okay, so you see that I'm not palpating like this. I'm palpating with my hand very flat. Suprasternal notch, I come across. Here is his sternoclavicular joint. Okay, so I can palpate his sternoclavicular joint. Okay, what I'd like you to do is raise your shoulders up for me and back down and up and back down. So what I'm doing is I'm keeping my hand still and I'm letting him move that joint so that I can feel the quality of the movement. If I was worried about symmetry, I could palpate bilaterally, which, can you see that there's an asymmetry there? If you look at him. So he has a much more prominent clavicle on this side than he does on this side. So let's go ahead and have you shrug both shoulders up. Okay, come back down. So he has a lot more movement on his right than his left. Okay, in his sternoclavicular joint, so whoever is his partner, that'll be fun. So if I stay on this side, I'm now going to palpate the length of his clavicle. The clavicle's in the shape of an S. Have you pulled out the bones of the shoulder in anatomy class? Okay, so you can palpate along here. And if we palpate to the end, I'm now on the acromioclavicular joint. Okay, so I'm at the end of the clavicle. Now, the acromion is part of the scapula, and it's this wide, okay? People don't ever appreciate the width of the acromion. I'm gonna get you across from here. It's that wide, okay? And the clavicle sits right on top of that to create the acromioclavicular joint. Now, Gabe told me before that he has a small separation, and you can see over here, his acromioclavicular joint is not nearly as wide, okay, as it is here. Now, so we're going to have his acromion here. So here's his anterior edge of his acromion. If I come down along the lateral edge of that, sorry.
No, it's okay.
This is going to be the subacromial space, and that's where you're going to find the subacromial bursa. It also can be called the subdeltoid bursa. And then if you follow the contour of the deltoid, so where it comes down, right there is going to be the deltoid tubercle. Okay? Now what's interesting about the deltoid tubercle is if the person has glenohumeral pain, that pain oftentimes can refer to the deltoid tubercle.
So what kind of pain?
If they have joint pain, so if they have glenohumeral pain, it's going to refer down to the deltoid tubercle. So when I say it's referred pain, when I press here, Gabe would say, yes, that's where it hurts, but your pressing on it doesn't hurt me, okay? Because the problem isn't really here, it's here, okay? So we're gonna start with that list. So we started with suprasternal notch, okay, that is attached to the manubrium. We went over to the sternoclavicular joint. We followed the clavicle all the way out until we got to the acromioclavicular joint, palpated the acromion, came off the side to where the subacromial subacromial bursa would be, and then went down to the deltoid tubercle. Okay, so we're going to start with that trail, if you will. Right? So I'm going to have you find those structures on one another. So go ahead and pair up. We've already palpated the acromion, which is part of the scapula. The other part of the scapula that's an anterior structure is the coracoid process, okay? And it's this little finger that sticks forward, okay? right here. And so it's just a little under your clavicle, and it's going to be medial to your humerus. And it's a really important structure because 3 muscles attach to it. Okay? I'm guessing you haven't gotten to that part of anatomy. You have?
Yeah.
Okay, so what are the 3 muscles?
Pec minor.
Okay, pec minor, short head of the biceps, and coracobrachialis. Great. Oh, awesome, guys. So this is going to be a really important structure to palpate because of those muscles that attach there. When we get to muscle length testing, we'll actually differentiate between those, among those 3 muscles. So we're going to palpate the coracoid, so we'll find that. And then we're going to go over to the anterior aspect of the humerus. Now, we're going to find the acromion. We're going to go straight anterior off the anterior rim of the acromion, and that's going to be the bicipital groove. Okay, so the long head of the biceps is going to come through that groove, and so we're going to find that bicipital groove. Now, depending on people's posture, Trevor, the arm is going to either be a little bit medially rotated or not. So if they're a little bit protracted, they might be a little bit medially rotated. So there are 2 peaks on either side of that groove, right? If we have a valley, we're going to have 2 peaks on either side. Inside is going to be the lesser tubercle. On the outside is going to be the greater tubercle. So to find those, I'm going to bend Emily's elbow. I'm going to put my fingers in the right spot on her humerus, and then I'm going to rotate her arm, and I'm going to feel those bumps come. They're going to move underneath my finger, okay? But I need to passively move her arm, because if she holds her arm up and she moves it, all the muscles are going to contract, and I'm not going to be able to feel the bone underneath. Okay, so it needs to be a passive test. So we're going to palpate the coracoid process, then we're going to palpate the bicipital groove, the lesser tubercle, and the greater tubercle. Okay, now I'm going to have you scoot forward just so your feet are you comfortable like that?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're on there?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any problems with your right shoulder?
No.
Okay. So Emily, I'm going to go ahead and look for some structures in your shoulder to see if they're contributing to your problem. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
So I'm going to find her clavicle, right? And then I'm going to come right down off her clavicle. And Emily's a great model because her coracoid just sticks right out at me. For some people who have anterior, no offense to your anterior delts, for people who perhaps have larger anterior delts, it might be a little bit harder to find the coracoid process. So I went down that road, but then I realized, I wouldn't want someone to say that about my anterior delt. Okay, so that's going to be her coracoid. Now I know that I'm not on her humerus because I could move her arm and I wouldn't get movement there. Oh, that's right. You've got the crazy shoulders. Just in moving her, I could feel some things going on in her shoulders, but we're going to save that for Tuesday, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So what I'm going to do is cradle her arm with my forearm. So remember, we're keeping the load close to my body. So I have her supported here. Now, I'm left-handed. So this palpating her right shoulder is going to be very easy for me. If you are right-handed, you're going to want to be here and palpating like this, but that doesn't work very well for the video, okay? So again, what I want you to notice is I'm not ever palpating like this. I always have my entire hand on all the time, right? So that's really what I want you all to get in the practice of. So I'm applying a little bit of pressure, right, to the front of your shoulder. And now what I'm doing is I'm just rotating her arm medially and laterally, and I'm feeling those tubercles pop out at me, so lesser and greater. So when I'm medial, I'm going to be on her greater tubercle. When I come here, I'm going to be in her groove. And then when I come out, her lesser tubercle is going to jump out at me. Okay? Now for everyone, it's going to be in a slightly different place. And you want your patient to have relaxed her arm for you. Okay? Now, Dr. Bryant and I will come along. So we're going to have our medial border here. Now, for a lot of the scapular structures that we're palpating, it's not the structure itself that we care about, but rather the muscles that attach there. Okay? So the medial border is one of the easiest structures to start with. And so here's the inferior angle, and we're going to come along that medial border. Then we're going to come up and around. For those of you who are close, you can see that Gabe has some swelling there. Okay, that's going to be his levator scapulae insertion. All right, so that's going to be his superior angle. And then we can follow that across. Now, there is the spine of the scapula. The spine of the scapula separates the supraspinatus muscle belly from the infraspinatus muscle belly. So the spine of the scapula is, if you just put your hand on their back, that's going to be what's popping out. So again, if we look at our angle, spine of the scapula, lateral border is going to be trickier because we're having to go through the teres muscles. So from the inferior angle, you're going to come around. And what I do is I go down and then I press medially so that then I'm banging up against his scapula. Okay? So I can come along, and then you're going to feel, you're going to feel it turn, and we're going to palpate that in prone. But it's going to be the infraglenoid tubercle, and that's right at the glenoid fossa, the inferior aspect, and that's going to be where it turns around on that lateral border. Okay, so we did spine, medial border, superior angle, inferior angle, lateral border. We talked about infraspinatus fossa, supraspinatus fossa. So first rib, I'm going to have you spin around again for me. First rib is implicated a lot actually in car accidents with shoulder straps. First rib can be involved in, usually it's some kind of trauma, actually. And the first rib, if you think of, like in the 50s, people wore the kind of the choker pearl necklaces, so they're really tight. That's where you're gonna find the first rib. So what you wanna do is put your hands just on the person's shoulders, and then you're going to wanna go in front of the upper trapezius, but behind the scalenes, and you're gonna go in at a 45-degree angle. Now the first rib is deep, so my hands are gonna have to leave being parallel to his skin, and I'm gonna go in at a 45-degree angle. Gabe, your scalenes are rocking hard too. So, not in a good way, sorry. He's got, we're still on video. You're going in at a 45-degree angle, and go ahead and take a deep breath in for me. And out. Okay, so super cool. Along with all this stuff going on over his first rib does not elevate on his left. Okay, but it does on his right. All right. Now, you're going to know you're on a first rib because when you go in, it's going to be bony when you get there. Okay? All right. Cool. What you're going to do is interlock your arms. So his arm is going to drop over mine. Okay? So now I'm going to come in along his medial border with my fingers. I'm going to push back. Now, I can do it one of two ways. Because I'm a little bit longer, I can use my forearm to push back over my fingers, or you can put one finger there. I'm gonna ask you to relax. I know it's hard. I can roll, and my fingers are a little bit long. I can have him roll right over my fingers, and then I've got his scapula. Okay. Okay. Yep, you're right. But so, for some of you, you'll be able to get far. You can get several of your IPs in there. Okay. So the other way is I can do it is I can get both fingers there and then roll him over it with my forearm if you're long enough. Okay. And then I've got it. Okay. But what we're doing now is palpating the subscapularis fossa. Okay. Okay. This is a natural height for me. I'm following the lateral border out. And again, here, what I'm going to feel is that the lateral border is going to start to cup out. Okay. And that's going to be the infraglenoid tubercle. This is going to be important to palpate for people who have capsule problems. Okay. Or if they have a labral problem, especially an inferior labral problem. okay? It's going to be much easier to palpate in prone than it was in sitting, and that's why I blew past it in sitting, because I want you to try to palpate that in prone first. It will be easier. So you're gonna follow lateral border up, it's going to curve around, and that's gonna be that infraglenoid tubercle. All the other structures you know. So the medial border, inferior angle, superior